Joining us now on the program is Dave Dulio. He's a professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, and he joins us again on the Michigan Megacast. Dave, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Tyler.
Appreciate having you on. It's been a very busy few weeks in the political realm in the U.S., but also around the world. Let's start with what's happening around the world. Yesterday, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, had announced that he was resigning from his office. Let's talk about how that impacts our relationship with one of our critical allies across the sea in England.
Sure. I think it's uncertainty, right? That is at the top of the list. There is, we don't know. In the last I read, we're not really sure when he's going to step down. It's sort of an intention to resign, I think. And then, then who's the next one? There are, I believe, a number of options on the table for the parliament over there to pick a prime minister, and or for one to sort of rise up from parliament. We'll have to wait and see. I think that's the biggest thing right now is uncertainty and maybe a bit of a guessing game on our side.
Yeah, Boris Johnson, very much a Donald Trump-like figure in the United Kingdom, had a great relationship with President Trump, and so that adds a little bit more to that uncertainty. What sort of personality is next in that office?
It does, and I also think too, we should remember that Johnson sort of came up in the Brexit movement, right, and was a major advocate of Britain leaving the European Union, right? So that's all part of the backdrop, I would say.
All things that impact us right here in Michigan. You think about the relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union and other European allies, certainly with what's going on in Ukraine at the moment, that all circles back to the U.S. And of course, that all circles back to Michigan. We're joined by Dave Dulio, professor of political science and director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, on the Michigan Megacast. Also in international news, this morning, unfortunate news, really sad news out of Japan, where their former president Shinzo Abe, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, was assassinated. He was shot at a political event this morning in Japan. Talk about his impact on Japanese and American relations, because he was in office amongst multiple presidencies here in the U.S., the Obama administration, the Trump administration, had great relationships with both of them, but also was critical in repairing some of the broken elements of the relationship between the United States and Japan.
Sure. I think, the history of the U.S.-Japanese relationship is it's a long one, right? But it also includes some tumult, obviously, with World War II being that main conflict, right? But after that, the U.S. and Japan have had a really good relationship. Now some of that may have been, and this is a little outside of my expertise, but it's when both the U.S. and Japan have China as an adversary, right? We're maybe in a bit of that, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? I mean, that kind of thing. So it's a relationship that's important geopolitically. It's a relationship that's important economically. And it's a terrible thing to have to see that the former PM is assassinated right there out in the open, right, middle of the day, with a weapon that's supposed to be hard to get in Japan. And I think I read this morning that it was some sort of home-fashioned weapon that was used, right? I mean, I think there's got to be a bunch more that's going to come out on this before we can really get the full story.
We're joined by Dave Dulio, professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. Dave, going back into American politics and politics that affects us here in the state of Michigan. On June 24th, of course, the Supreme Court made a decision that overturned Roe versus Wade and the federal permissions for abortion nationwide. Of course, that means that the power to determine the legality of abortion and the details of that legality goes back to each of the individual states. Here in the state of Michigan, abortion at this time still legal due to an injunction from the 1931 law that would outlaw abortion in the state. Give us some more insight into that injunction, how that stands to allow abortions to continue to be legal, and how long that may stand as being legal here in the state of Michigan, given that it is simply just an injunction on one particular law?
Sure. So the ball is squarely in the court of the courts, and they're on their own timeline. They're going to do what they will with it. They're going to they could move very quickly. They might drag it out, right? I mean, and there's reasons for I guess both sides of the question to maybe find some positives in that, right? I think the speed aspect of it could be settled very quickly. I think the pro-life side would not like to see it drag on much longer. And you've got the governor on one angle of this legal fight, and Planned Parenthood on the other angle of it. So there's actually a number of different moving parts to it. I think that really, who knows when the courts are going to? It's all a bit of a mystery, if you will, in some respects.
And on top of that, and that element of mystery, particularly on the statewide side, but also the element of mystery on what's going to happen federally. There's been discussion of codifying Roe versus Wade into law in some capacity or in another. There's a bunch of other issues with that. We just talked to Representative Andy Levin about some of those issues recently on the Megacast, also mymytv.com for replay on that. And so there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding abortion, and it's becoming a really critical issue statewide and federally. And we're heading into election season with the primaries in August. How much of an impact, how much of really a flash in the pan is that Supreme Court decision in impacting Michigan's elections in August?
Yeah, Tyler, I think it's a big one, and that's maybe the understatement of the year, right? I mean, it's bound to have a large impact, and it's had a big impact previously, right? But there's a dynamic that's changed, and I think that this is interesting to me. For years and years and years, when Roe was the law of the land, if you will, the most important campaign electoral angle was the U.S. Senate, right? And because with control of the U.S. Senate comes control of the advice and consent process when the president makes an appointment to the Supreme Court, right? So if the Senate is in Republican hands or Democratic hands, that has an impact on who gets on the court. And we saw that during the Trump years, right? With Republicans able to, and President Trump able to get anybody he wanted in those three appointments. Yet, during those years, we often heard state legislative candidates talk about abortion when there was little they could do because it was a federally guaranteed option for women, right? Now, that's all changed. And the state legislative and state level offices really are the center of what abortion policy is going to be here in Michigan. It's the state legislature and the governor to sign any laws that come out of there that would either expand or contract abortion access in Michigan, right? So, and the federal lawmakers, right? Well, they may have their opinions. They're sort of out of the loop on this now, and where the real the rubber's going to meet the road here at the state legislative level, and certainly in the governor's office. But then also we have this ballot proposition that looks like it's going to have enough signatures to get on the ballot to enshrine that right in the Michigan state constitution. So again, lots of uncertainty, lots of moving parts, but what else is new in politics these days?
How does that impact the election party to party? Because I would imagine for the Democratic Party, this issue, given the makeup of the legislature in the state of Michigan, they're going to be very much focused on voter turnout to try to get their candidates elected and flip the House and the Senate in Michigan blue, while also maintaining the gubernatorial race and trying to get the governor, Gretchen Whitmer, our incumbent governor, reelected. For the Republicans, it is maintaining what is already been made precedent at the federal level and holding the line in Michigan, just how much of a critical issue does this then become for both parties and getting people out to vote in the midterms when we typically see significantly lower turnout?
Yeah, I think, and to your point there, if we took the, say, last 40 or 50 years of midterm elections, we average about 40% voter turnout, which is pretty crummy, if we're being honest about it, right? I mean, that's 60% of those folks who are eligible not taking the opportunity to cast a ballot. That's a whole other sort of kettle of fish. I think that this is a huge issue that has the potential to drive turnout on both sides. I think that you're right that this may fire up Democrats more than Republicans, just given the change in status quo. However, some polling that I've seen nationwide, so not necessarily here in Michigan, but that there hasn't been a whole lot of movement in terms of vote choice at the congressional level from before that Supreme Court decision in the Dobbs case to after that decision in the Dobbs case. So, again, we're in this sort of uncertain time here where we have to wait and see how different issues play out, how different sort of political winds shift. I think that my hunch is that inflation, gas prices, the economy are higher for more Americans on the list of priorities than abortion is. Now, it's not saying that there aren't many Americans who have that at the top of their list, but I think for more Americans right now, it's inflation and gas prices.
We're joined by Dave Dulio. He is a professor of political science at Oakland University, where he also serves as the director of its Center for Civic Engagement and joins us on the Michigan Megacast. Keep up to date on everything happening in the political science department and at the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University on the website, oakland.edu. That's oakland.edu for more information. In a gubernatorial race, still plenty of candidates left in the race for the Republican side. Of course, that base was cut in half due to fraudulent signatures or questionable signatures on half of the candidates' ballots, including who some considered to be the front runner, James Craig, the former chief of police in the city of Detroit. Even more controversial, I would say, than that is Ryan Kelly, who appears to be one of the front runners for the Republican nomination by way of a primary vote at this time, was arrested recently for his role in the January 6th Capitol riots and insurrection. Federally, he actually just yesterday had pled not guilty to charges, 4 misdemeanor charges arising from his participation in the January 6th riot. Despite that, his polling numbers still seem to be quite favorable in the Republican Party. Can you speak about how that reflects where the Republican Party in the state of Michigan is at this time, and then his viability as a candidate, knowing that he could come under even more fire for this from the courts?
Sure, I think that it raises the Kelly campaign should be concerned, not just because of the publicity that they're getting, right, and maybe raising questions in some voters' minds. And I think that again, this is a really unique primary year where just the fact that a handful of candidates were not permitted on the ballot because of the difficulties with the signatures that you mentioned. I think the fact that there's no now or when those others were in the race, no sort of GOP star, right, was part of that or is part of that group, right? I mean, they're all sort of up and comers, newcomers to politics in general, to some degree, and certainly at the gubernatorial level. I think one of the things to keep an eye on is Tudor Dixon and the endorsements that she keeps racking up. I think that there's a sort of establishment Republican move to try to get her to be the nominee, right? There's when you've got folks like John Engler and Betsy DeVos that are endorsing you, right? That's pretty establishment Republican, and that'll be frankly a positive in some respects for her and a negative in others, right? And folks like Mr. Rinke, Mr. Soldano, Mr. Kelly are going to try and coalesce that Trump base around their candidacies. I think if and that's not to say that Ms. Dixon isn't going to try to tap into some of that Trump base as well. But I think the race is starting to shift a little bit here about a month away from primary day.
We're joined by Dave Dulio. He is the professor of political science and director of Civic Engagement, of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, joining us on the Michigan Megacast. Dave, a few more minutes with you before we'll need to say goodbye today. We're approaching the primaries in early August. The general is in early November. Plenty of action in the political realm here in the state of Michigan. What's going on at the Center for Civic Engagement to help the community get prepared and have healthy debates on all these many different issues currently in our political realm, but also that will be arising between now and August and now in November?
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. It's always great to be able to share what we're planning on OU's campus with your audience. We have a number of irons in the fire. I can't say with certainty much about any of them, but I think you and your audience will be very interested in a number of things that we're going to bring the community in the fall semester at Oakland University.
We're joined by Dave Julio. He is the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, where he also is a professor of political science. More information can be found on the Center for Civic Engagement and keep up to date on all their upcoming discussions and events, oakland.edu/CCE. Dave, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Tyler.